Today's entry question is, for what just reasons should the U.S. get involved in a war? Personally, would you have wanted to go to war to stop the Nazis? Please respond to this question in your notebook, and then turn to the person next to you and share your answer. Today we're going to be learning about U.S. involvement in World War II and what caused us to get involved in this war. Many people, when they think of World War II, they think of Nazi Germany, they think of the Jewish Holocaust and the concentration camps. But one of the things that you might not know about is that this war was actually primarily fought by the U.S. on two fronts, one in Japan and the other in Europe. So Japan is one of our major enemies during World War II. And this is something that is not often reflected on. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria. This is the Korean peninsula just north of China. You can see it pictured here in red. It's really close to Japan. And this was the beginning of Japan's expansion into Asia. The League of Nations, which Japan was a part of, condemned the action. They saw this as intolerable and basically said, shame on you to Japan. But there wasn't really much that they were able to do to stop this expansion. The League of Nations and the United States put economic sanctions on Japan, which basically decreased our trade with Japan and decreased their ability to trade war materials and other things. But this really didn't do much to stop Japan's expansion. Japan decided to leave the League of Nations, which the United States wasn't a part of either. The United States did not recognize Japan's control over Manchuria, and this infuriated Japan because they felt like the U.S. was being hypocritical since we had conquered new territories just a few decades earlier. In 1932, a year later, Japan bombed Shanghai, which is a major city in China, pictured on the map there, and this was a continuation of their expansion into Asia. In 1937, 5 years later, there was an incident involving Americans in mainland China. December 12, 1937, Japan bombed the USS Panay gunboat and 3 Standard Oil tankers in the Yangtze River, which is in mainland China, a place that we had access to and were trading with. The river was on an international waterway, and several Americans died in this bombing. Japan apologized, they paid the U.S. an indemnity, and promised no further attacks. And surprisingly, most Americans were satisfied with this apology. This is sort of breaking from the norm, since in most other incidents where American lives have been taken, the United States has used it as an excuse to go to war. In this case, we were satisfied with the apology and continued to stay out of World War II, even though Japan and others were part of the Axis powers. This is really interesting, and for me solidifies my understanding that this was a period of isolation and that Americans really did not want to be involved in this war. The Japanese interpreted the U.S. tone as a license for further aggression against U.S. interests. As in World War I, the U.S. had been involved in the war far before it was declared. The United States provided arms and goods to the Allied forces in Europe, and we really profited from this. U.S. corporations benefited greatly from the war and pushed for U.S. engagement, as seen here in this political cartoon. Isolation was tying up everybody. There were people that were saying do nothing, and other people that were saying help everybody in Europe and in China. But the United States stayed out. Despite the Nazi aggression and Japanese expansion, the United States stayed out of war. We're now going to watch a clip from the movie Pearl Harbor. This will really give us an understanding of what happened that day when our naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii was bombed. A little background on this movie. There is a love triangle between the three characters pictured here. The character on the left was believed to be dead. He had gone over to Europe to fight with England because the United States was not involved in the war. And people believed he had died. And so his girlfriend, who's in the middle there, thinking he was dead, began the process of mourning, and she and his best friend fell in love. And in the clips that you're going to see, he actually comes back from the dead. He never died, he survived, and he comes back to find his best friend and his girlfriend in love with each other. So this is sort of the drama of the movie, but not our point. So try to stay focused on the military and the historical pieces in this clip.